Welcome to Analytics Nexus. Thanks for joining us for Jose Maldonado's presentation. Next Gen BI, translating business needs into visualization at speed. Jose began his career at Verizon at their wireless retail stores in New York City. After a year, he obtained a role in the reporting and analysis team at the New York regional headquarters. In this role, Jose was introduced to databases, SQL, and business intelligence tools. Since then, Jose has been motivated to learn and apply new techniques in the analytics field. He's driven to share those learnings with his teams with hopes to make an even bigger impact on the business.
Thanks for joining Analytics Nexus. My name is Jose Maldonado, and I'll be talking to you today about next-gen business intelligence, next-gen BI, and translating business needs into visualizations at speed. As I said, I'm currently a manager of business intelligence and have been doing business intelligence and analytic work at Verizon for over 10 years across different teams in different scopes. And I'll be going over, some of the things that I've seen and what I'm seeing coming up with the business intelligence trends. So goals of the presentation today are to first establish a baseline and talk about what is business intelligence. We'll talk about the traditional sense of business intelligence, as well as some modern techniques and modern options that we're seeing in business intelligence tools today. And then we'll talk about what are those current trends and how do they help us, the traditional analysts, and even those of us that are just getting started and starting to get a feel for what business intelligence is. So what is business intelligence? Well, business intelligence is the practice of collecting, integrating, analyzing, and presenting data with the goal of driving better business decisions. So that seems a bit loaded, but the idea is that business intelligence professionals and teams are gathering data from different parts of the business. They're trying to add context to that data by enriching data sets, by combining different data sets, analyzing them, and then presenting them so that business professionals and they themselves, the business intelligence professionals, can see those trends and act upon them. To give you a sense of the BI landscape, and this isn't all-inclusive, but here's some examples of BI platforms by taking a look at the Magic Quadrant for analytics and business intelligence platforms. You'll see some players here that you've probably all heard of, particularly Microsoft and their Power BI platform, Tableau, Click, and then you have some other more niche players, folks like Looker or Domo, that are also in the space and maybe you may not have heard of, through your work. Traditional BI. So traditionally, BI practice was more focused on internal data from the organization. And it was a lot about report creation and dashboard creation. Traditional BI is thought to be very top-down, meaning that the requirements and the requests for what goes into the BI applications are coming from teams or executives that want to see data in a very specific way. The typical process will have the team extract operational data, perform some ETL, which is extract, transform, and load functions to load data to a data warehouse, and then create and publish reports and dashboards for end users to consume. The end-to-end process was usually owned by one team, and in the past, that was probably an IT team that kind of owned that process end-to-end. The teams would also manage access to those reports and dashboards, so they were the gatekeepers to said reports. And some benefits of the traditional BI systems were that there were really good constraints on data governance, right? Because they were owned by one team and everything happened end to end within that organization. You could be sure that they would process the data or they would define metrics in the same way. There was a lot more trust in the data And usually these systems are considered kind of a single source of truth. And traditional BI, you know, a lot of it exists today. When I talk about traditional BI and when we go into the modern BI, these things aren't mutually exclusive. They can coexist. So just to give a recap on that traditional BI, mainly owned and maintained by IT departments or a single group. It doesn't necessarily have to be IT. The reports and dashboards in a traditional BI sense are usually static. You'll see some filtering, but what you see is usually what you get when it comes to traditional BI. There's a limited number of end users because those constraints and the governance is very tightly guarded by that one group. There's longer turnaround time to create a new report or a new dashboard, to make edits or to introduce new systems to a traditional BI approach. And real-time updates are very rare or non-existent. These things are usually batch updated. They have their regular cadence, whether it be a daily, a weekly, or monthly refresh. And that's, in a nutshell, what we know as traditional BI. On the other end, we have modern BI. So modern BI is not just about the tools that we use, but more so of the approach. And I threw these examples of tools out there because they have some of the features that encapsulate what we define as modern BI. So modern BI refers to some newer practices and capabilities in the BI space. These include tools that enable self-service analytics. A lot of what really defines or separates the traditional BI from modern BI is that self-service kind of model. You know, there's predictive analytic features in some of the modern BI tools, as opposed to strictly descriptive. So just instead of just showing you what happened, you can actually predict what might happen with some of the capabilities in modern tools. There's faster and more agile systems to insight. There's enhanced sharing capabilities. So in some modern BI tools, there's ability to you know, kind of comment and share, you know, download raw data that feeds these reports. Some of the things that you may not see in more traditional systems. And there's more empowerment to the end user. Now, that's what a lot of these features hope to get is give more power to those end users. We see some clear benefits, right, in the features and abilities to quickly prototype in modern BI approach, but there can be some downsides. So when we talked about traditional BI having strong roots with data governance and being controlled by one team, it's a little bit different in modern BI because so many more users have access to the tools, many more users have access to the data. They can kind of cut the data their own way and kind of redefine some of those metrics. And there's users that can go ahead and publish dashboards or publish reports out there since it isn't controlled by a single group. And that can start to, you know, get weary on some, you know, end users and consumers when they see those reports. They don't know who it's coming from. They don't know how the metrics might be defined behind it if there's not good documentation for those BI applications. Modern BI does create some complexities when it comes to data governance because of the fact that there are more users publishing dashboards and less knowledge about how those users are doing so. Also note that the approaches are not mutually exclusive. As I said, organizations can leverage both traditional approach and some modern approaches. A good example might be that a company might go with a more traditional BI approach for a lot of their financial reporting. They want that to be owned by a single team. They want to have some strict controls over who has access to that data, and they may not want that data to be as easily shared or folks to try to predict some things on those financial instruments, where as opposed to modern BI can exist for other data, particularly maybe someone that's managing a social media channel. So they might want something that's a little bit larger to scale, something they can share with different parts of the organization, marketing, you know, sales, strategy, whatever it may be. So again, these things can coexist. They work differently, different features, and there's different upsides and downsides to each of the two flavors. Okay, so just to recap, modern BI promotes the self-serve approach. There's faster compute power to process more data in a lot of these modern BI tools, easier to develop the visualizations. There's a lot of drag and drop in modern BI tools as opposed to straight coding. There's ability to edit sometimes on the web with the modern BI tools, collaboration tools built in. So we talked about that sharing capability. Some modern BI tools also leverage the use of natural language processing, which we'll get to a little bit later. More data moving to the cloud within the modern BI tools, and push for data democratization. Let me say that again one more time. And a push for more data democratization, meaning more power to the end user. Okay, so what are some of the trends and what are they telling us with some of the modern BI tools and the features that are being added? Okay, ETL, making it more accessible. So we talked about extract, transform, and load when we spoke about traditional BI, but this is something that it happens across all BI. We really need to get data, we need to source it, we need to transform it, clean it up, maybe integrate it with some different data sets, and essentially we need to load it back into the system to create those nice visualizations. All right, so making ETL more accessible. And what I mean by that is that a lot of the BI providers are doing easy to use ETL tools available and in some cases built into the BI tools. Sometimes you get folks like a Tableau, which has some ETL functionality, very basic, built in, but they've also have a partner product, Tableau Prep, that lets you do even more ETL outside of the Tableau product, but still within their ecosystem. So it gives you ability to do a lot more with your data. And they understand that that's very important to the end user and very important in order to stand up a BI application. So BI software companies continue to expand the number of data types and data sources that they can connect to. Some of the major BI players have included those capabilities and integrated them right into their product so that you can do things like joins and unions, as well as transformations to your data, and see those transformations kind of real time with your data. Some of them provide some graphical interfaces where you can see your histograms and you can see the distribution of that data as you're making the changes, which is great for a lot of users that want to know how their actions are shaping their data. But why? Why are they doing this? They understand that the data on its own is pretty much meaningless in its rawest form. The data needs to be cleaned, needs to be translated from its original source system into something that's easily digestible by end users. So if you've ever seen how some of the data columns get named in a database, it's not very intuitive. And you might want to change this when you're spinning up a dashboard and you want it to be easily readable by the end users and the folks that will be consuming the data. The data needs context. So it means that you might want to bring other pieces of data that maybe don't live in the database system in order to enrich it and tell the full story that you want to convey. So ETL, something traditionally handled by an IT group or a kind of center of excellence or some type of central organization that managed it, specialized BI teams, what you will, would contain just the first party data of the organizations when it happens in that format. But now when the end user's doing some ETL on their own, they can get a little more creative and they can kind of work outside the box and bring in some third and second party data to add even more context to their data set. Another trend, look, no code. A lot of the tools are offering options where users don't need to necessarily know code to get into the door. So a lot of drag and drop. So you see this a lot in Tableau, you see it in Looker, you see it in a lot of other different platforms where you can just take the measures from the data that you've brought in and click and drag them into a canvas, and you can make visualizations or you can make data tables that much easier with the use of the drag and drop. So you don't necessarily need to learn to code to get started with a lot of these tools. They're adding options and functionality for users to come in and be able to create visualizations without any need for code in the beginning. Now, a lot of them do integrate with R or Python or SQL, and you can get into that later, and a lot of them have their own little coding language within, even Tableau. In order to create some of the more advanced calculated fields, you will need to learn some bit of coding within the Tableau world, or maybe you want to integrate with R and Python later to add some additional functionality and take your BI tool to the next level. But the door for beginners is kind of wide open. The learning curve is low, and you can jump right in with some drag and drop. Another trend that we're seeing is no traditional software on your computer. So typically you would download some software onto your machine in order to get started with any of these BI tools. But a lot of them are also enabling folks to access those tools on the web. So Tableau has added a ton of functionality that you can edit or publish reports right on the web without having to have the software installed on your machine. That means that maybe you can use a secondary laptop, or maybe you can use a mobile device to view these dashboards or to interact with them. Looker also does the same, where you can actually build, publish, edit dashboards right on the web without having to have the software installed on your machine. So another great way to make these things more accessible. Another trend that we're seeing is more focus on data governance. So we talked about how data governance is key in traditional BI and one of the strong suits of traditional BI, and something that needs to be worked on and part of a challenge when it comes to a lot of the self-serve BI, when there's a lot of users publishing reports. So the benefits that can come with a enhanced data governance scheme is, that single source of truth feeling that, you have trust behind the data, and that everyone's aligned as to how you're measuring the KPIs, how you're defining them. And when you have more users that have access to the raw data, it can create many versions of the truth. As these new users create their own dashboards and reports and publish them out into the wild, it can be difficult to decide which views to trust. Data governance attempts to tackle this inconvenience. Some BI providers are now creating mechanisms that allow users to certify the data and create trusted data sources for these views. So what that means is that the folks that own the views, or the folks that kind of manage that data infrastructure that's flowing into the BI systems, can look at the data, see if it lines up with other reporting systems, other sources of truth, if you will, in the organization, and say, yeah, this data is true to the other systems that we have. That adds that layer of trust. Other providers are taking a slightly different approach. They're doing some ETL up front and some data governance up front before it even gets pumped into that mechanism. So there's some folks that use tools like Looker or ThoughtSpot, and there's a lot of data pre-processing going on before it even hits the system. And then when the users are consuming it, then it's already certified. They can go ahead and create those views without worry that what they create won't match back to those sources of truth. This reduces the risk of misalignment, of course, if you have that strong data governance. And BI providers are introducing those tools to help manage, a lot of different aspects of data governance. When it comes to profiling, we talk about the definitions and that master data management. So they're adding tools that help with that knowledge. So adding additional context about the data and business definitions. And some of that knowledge can also be transferred with those kind of social aspects that are being added to data and BI tools. So that helps a bit on the governance side. Owners, so assignment of owners, and easy to find those owners of data. So if I'm working on a data set, and maybe I'm working on some customer care data, then it's good for me to know who the owner of that data set is so that I can certify and find out if the data I'm working with is in fact correct. Easy way to also find the user, so who's using this data, make sure they understand how to use it and where to source it from. Quality of the data, so ensuring that the data is of good quality. It comes in the same format every time and represents the same data sets every time. The accuracy, so is it constantly being sourced from the right place and presenting the right metrics. The access controls with these data governance tools, so making sure that if you have those certified data sets, you grant access to the right folks, and if the data set's not certified, make sure that you try to restrict some of that access so that you don't get that misinformation flowing out too much. And then the security, making sure that you have you're following the right legal or the right organizational restrictions in terms of what type of data you're allowed to store in your BI applications. Natural language processing is another element that's being added to the modern BI space, and we're seeing it come across from a couple of different vendors. So what I mean by natural language processing is you would search on your BI application the same way you would perform something like a Google search. So there would be a search box. You can type in your query, something like, what were sales in 2019 by month, and a chart would populate. So what's happening is these systems are taking that query from the user, they're bouncing it back to the database. The database is returning an answer set, and that system's going to produce a data set that you can either download, it'll populate in a graph that you can make some minor edits on, and you can go ahead and consume that data. Again, this kind of goes back and ties a little bit into that no-code interface where the user is actually kind of using a BI tool a little bit like a pseudo database. They're using that as a front end to go ahead and consume some data in the database in a way that it's already kind of pre-structured for them and pre-indexed for them. So that's how they're able to leverage getting more users to using the BI application by making it even more accessible and adding natural language processing. This does require that the teams that are producing the BI layer here do a lot more taxonomy and a lot more data dictionary and definitions in the background, because you do need to monitor for what words the end users are querying and being able to translate that back to the KPIs or the business language that is being used in the organization. Are we using something like sales or acquisitions, or are we using retention or churn? What are the words that we're using, and what do those words translate to when it comes to the metrics in the database that we want to relay back? All right, and to recap those trends, we talked about approachable ETL tools. We talked about how important it is for the end users to be able to get data, transform it and load it up to their BI applications. And a lot of the BI providers are going ahead and listening to their end users and providing more approachable tools to do exactly that. No code requirement. So this makes it easier for more users to jump in and work with BI tools to do their analysis. There's a lower learning curve. They can step right in, do some drag and drop, and create some nice visualizations, create some nice data stories without a lot of learning up front. Web-based solutions. So this talks about accessibility from a different perspective, being able to jump on your mobile device to consume a BI dashboard, BI report on a tablet, or being able to jump on a Chromebook or another device that may not support the full application so that you can view, consume, even create or edit BI applications from another source like that is something that the BI providers are focusing in on. Data governance, again, we talked about, is something that's a challenge for modern BI and something that I see it needs some continuous work. This is one of probably the hardest challenge to tackle when it comes to trying to scale a BI culture or data culture in an organization. You're giving a lot more folks access to BI tools, and the data governance is, sometimes not all there in terms of the trust behind the data and the accuracy behind the data. And then finally, natural language processing. So, trying to push that no code requirement even to a higher level. And even the natural language processing sometimes doesn't just relieve the users from not having to learn code to get started and to consume from a BI application, but it also does some work for the BI developers, right? Some BI developers would have to produce less views of the same data if, we had a data set that included all of the results, and users can query that using natural language and modify those charts. Then that's a lot less charts, because we know that some people might consume the data differently. These natural language processing BI applications are helping on both ends of the spectrum. Easier to consume and less development up front, but a lot more focus. All of that work gets shifted into the folks that are doing the metadata management, the taxonomy at the end, and trying to map all of those queries to the right business questions so that the end users get what they're looking for when they query against the system. And that kind of wraps up a lot of the trends that I'm seeing in the BI space, and that I think are really taking BI applications to the next level in order to make them even more accessible, even more self-serve than they are today, and adding to the data democratization vision of a lot of the BI players. Thank you for joining, and feel free to reach out if you have any questions or want to talk some more. Thank you.
Thanks so much for watching this presentation. Join us on the Analytics Nexus Slack to talk with our presenters about this topic and more.